Well, for more on the Rooibos industry, we're joined by the Professor of University of Stellenbosch, Owen Dean. Owen, we've been following the story quite closely because there's not a whole lot that comes out of South Africa that can, I suppose, be trademarked in a global scenario. Rooibos being one of those exceptions. Is there room for celebration, yourself being an intellectual property expert, that we now do indeed own this name?
Yes, I think it's a very important milestone that has been reached. The problem has been that Rooibos is well known and identified in South Africa, but in the international marketplace, all sorts of people have tried to jump on the bandwagon, and most recently in France. Now, there is an international system in place to protect so-called geographical indications, GIs. And once you get a name like Rooibos elevated to that status, then it enjoys pretty well worldwide protection, and nobody else can use it without the authority of the Rooibos growers. It's been a long road to get to this point, but eventually it has happened, and we're now in the stage where we can claim international protection of Rooibos.
Owen, I've had Rooiboses from Starbucks all over the place. I've had it in Germany where it's called Rooibos, SCH. I've seen it on the shelves in London. Does this have any implications for the people who are marketing it over there?
Well, if it's the genuine article, then there isn't a problem. Obviously, if it's exported to those countries and they sell and market the goods there, that's fine. But what one wants to prevent is that others try and pass off something which isn't Rooibos as Rooibos. So that is what South Africa would seek to prevent at this stage.
So Starbucks will have to buy their Rooibos from South Africa in future? Only from South Africa?
They will indeed, because, well, they could perhaps get a comparable product, but they couldn't call it Rooibos. If they want to call it Rooibos, it has to come from South Africa, and it has to be from the genuine source.
This must have significant economic benefits then, Owen?
Yes, it does, because obviously the Rooibos seems to have generated a reputation in overseas countries, and it would seem as though that the demand that has been generated has been satisfied partly by non-South African products. Whereas now, if people want Rooibos, they will be getting the genuine article, and only South Africa will be supplying Rooibos.
It is somewhat ironic that the French are trying to hijack this, given the furore around champagne.
Well, that is correct. I mean, the French have been at the forefront of the protection of so-called GIs, and they've been extremely jealous about champagne. And so it's only right that we should now get the same sort of protection that champagne enjoys throughout the world.
Does this highlight more work that needs to be done with regard to intellectual property protection in South Africa?
Well, we've been very slow in utilizing this international regime for protection of GIs. And to some extent, the Department of Trade and Industry have been dragged kicking and screaming into this arrangement, because we could have got to this point many years ago. And it was really this attempt to register Rooibos as a trademark in France which sparked off this current step that has been taken. But it was partly due to action on the part of the European Union, because the European Union said to South Africa, we're very happy to protect Rooibos, but you've got to take the first step. You first have to protect Rooibos in South Africa. Now, amazingly enough, Rooibos was not protected in South Africa up to that point, and I'm talking about just about a year ago. And so steps were eventually taken to give the name protection in South Africa, which is an indispensable condition for it being protected internationally. In other words, the international environment won't protect the name unless you protect it properly in your own country.
What about something like Hoodia? We know that it's a huge product in the diet industry around the world. It's only grown here in South Africa and in Namibia. Is that a similar kind of an opportunity here to trademark it and make it proudly South African?
Well, look, I mean, Hoodia has been used in various pharmaceutical products, and there are benefit sharing arrangements in place in terms of which the local San people benefit from commercialization of Hoodia. I don't know that Hoodia as a name is that well known. So in other words, I don't know that it carries much force in the marketplace to be calling something Hoodia. But if it does, I mean, if it turns out that way, then obviously Hoodia should go down the same road as Rooibos.
Yeah, I think we need to do some research there. Go and have a look at the stores overseas. My wife used to have a health store, so I've got a pretty good insight into Hoodia is marketed aggressively, and perhaps there's another opportunity. But it's an interesting point, the one that Gugu brought up a little earlier, about South Africa perhaps not paying as much attention as we should to these trademarks. Are there any other, setting Hoodia aside, and now that we've gone ahead with Rooibos, but are there any other trademarks that, in your opinion, we should be paying attention to?
Well, when you say trademark, it's not quite a trademark. It's what is called a geographical indication. In other words, it is a name which has a geographical significance. Like champagne, which only comes from a certain area of France, so Rooibos only comes from a certain area of South Africa. So this road down which Rooibos has gone can be followed by any other geographically orientated names. For instance, Stellenbosch wine route would be another example. Karoo lamb was mentioned in your video clip. So there are these names. The people have speculated with biltong, for instance, as another possibility which could be protected in this manner.
Well, looking forward to that one. Biltong, huh? Beef jerky in the US. But thank you so much to Professor Owen Dean. He's a professor at the University of Stellenbosch.